Hello, hello. This is Mrs. Peeved, and today I am recording my second son's, Jeremiah's, birth story. It's just going to be me talking kind of about the end of my pregnancy, the labor, and the delivery. And yeah. So with Jeremiah, my official due date was actually June 22nd. May 28th, I went in for a office visit. And they realized that I was, 50% effaced and dilated to a 5. So they immediately put me on bed rest because I was doing the whole midwife thing. I was going through a birth center with licensed midwives, not nurse midwives, but just licensed midwives, which there is a difference. But I felt comfortable with that decision. And we were going through them in Georgetown, Texas. I'm trying to remember what the name is. They were the nearest midwives to us. They were still a ways off. We don't live in Georgetown, but they were the nearest ones to us. Central Texas Birth Center. Central Texas Birth Center is in Georgetown, Texas, and they're who we were going to. We don't live in Georgetown, Texas, but they were the nearest midwives to us. And I would highly recommend them. There's the team member leaders are Heather and Sally. Fantastic midwives. I really had an enjoyable experience with them. So I went in for a visit May 28th, and my due date was June 22nd. May 28th, I found out that I was dilated to a 5 and like 20% effaced. They kind of freaked out and told me to be on bed rest. So I was on bed rest for like a couple of weeks, taking it very easy. Bed rest was kind of hard. My mom had to come over a lot. My mom lives like 7-minute drive away. She lives like really close. If you're looking on a map, it takes about a 7-minute drive. And she had to come over a lot and help me with my son. Well, June 13th, my husband was getting ready for work. So it was his second night overnight, I want to say. He was getting ready for work. And around 9:30, I don't know, I felt something. It wasn't quite a cramp, but I'm not sure. It was something. And I went in there while he was getting ready for work, and I said, honey, you might want to wait a minute. I think I might be going into labor. So I started texting my midwife, and she's like, well, keep me updated. At 5 till 10, at 9:55, I suddenly went from gut instinct telling me that labor was about to start, because really there were no signs or symptoms. It was just gut instinct. At 9:55, I had a horrible contraction. Now keep in mind, this was June 13th, and I've been on bed rest since May 28th, being dilated to a 5. At that point, I was like dilated to an 8 at my last visit, because I just kept going, slowly progressing, but showing no signs of labor. Like I wasn't having contractions or anything, not even Braxton Hicks. And all of a sudden I had this horrible contraction. I said, oh, this is labor. I actually was sitting there kind of bouncing on my exercise ball. I don't know what you call those. Stability balls. That's what it is. I was bouncing on my stability ball watching TV. I fell off the ball because the contraction was so hard. And it came out of nowhere. I screamed because it just, not because it hurt that bad, but I mean, it did hurt, but more that it just was, there was no progress, no mild contractions first. It was just, bam, I'm in labor. So I screamed, and my husband came out, and he said, what's wrong? I said, I'm in labor. So he calls his manager and says, okay, yeah, I can't go on. Carol just went into full-blown labor. And it was like 10 o'clock at that point. We called my midwife. She called her team, and they started driving this way. And she's like, do you know what to do? Because we may not get there. We're like 40 minutes away because, again, they live in Georgetown. And we're like, yeah, we're fine. Just, do get here as soon as you possibly can. And we did have a plan B in case, things went bad. We knew which hospital was closest to us, how we were going to get there. I called my mom, not only because she wanted to see the birth, but in case we did have to go to the hospital, she could take my oldest son, Eddie G, and watch him because he was 1. He was, 20 months at that time? He was not 2 yet. I want to say he was 20 or 21 months. 21 months. And that way she could just watch him if we did have to go to the hospital. Which, is always, as long as you plan for it, how the baby gets here isn't as important as it's healthy and you do have a plan B in case things go wrong. Because sometimes in birth, things do go wrong and you need to be prepared for that, especially if you're doing like a home birth like we were. It was a planned home birth. Or if you want to like do a birth center birth. You got to have a plan B, and that's fine. So my mom came over and we started timing the contractions. They were coming hard and fast. Well, the midwives got here and they started to blow up the pool for us. And I was on my knees with the stability ball underneath my chest. And I was just kind of rolling back and forth and having my mom time contractions for me. My husband was trying to keep our oldest son, Eddie G, because my scream from the first contraction woke him up. It was 10 o'clock. He did not go to bed for the rest of the night. Eddie G was awake for the entire labor and delivery. Poor little guy. He was only 20 months. He was so sweet about it, though. Anyway, so my mom was timing my contractions. Midwives got there. They blew up the pool, and I don't know why, but as soon as the midwives got there, I don't know if I was nervous or if because I was remembering Eddie G's experience, my body started to slow down. Labor slowed down. It wasn't non-existent, it just slowed down. They got a birth tub inflated in my living room. They filled it up. I went and sat in it. My husband got in there with me. And Eddie G, my 20-month-old son, was walking around the tub constantly. And every time I had a contraction, he would come because I was sitting on my knees with my arms over the edge. He would come and hug me and pat my head or my back and kiss me on the lips going, "You okay? You okay?" It was the sweetest thing ever. And my midwives loved it. My mom loved it. My husband loved it. It was just the most beautiful thing ever. And I've been for months trying to tell my son that there was this baby in mommy's stomach, and I never knew how much she understood or grasped. They were closer in age than I wanted. I actually wanted a little bit further apart so he could kind of understand more of what was happening, but that didn't happen. And labor went on like that for about 6 hours. At the 6 hours mark, at the 5 hour mark, my labor actually slowed dramatically, and the pain of the contractions dropped from a 9 to about a 5. And it was like my labor was reversing, and the contractions were so far apart. They were 20 minutes apart at that point. When previously, I first called the midwives, they were every 4 minutes. So the midwife started kind of talking, and it was so late. Let's see. It was like 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. It was like 2 in the morning on June 14th. And the midwives were kind of talking. They're like, "Carol, you're so close, and you've been effaced and dilated, and your body is ready, but your water bag has not busted." And I didn't know that. I was like, well, that's what kind of happened with my first. That's why things went bad. She goes, "Do you mind if I try and pop your water bag?" And I was like, okay, yeah. You know what? Let's just do that. So we came into my bedroom. They laid me on the bed. She put on a glove, which had like a little hook thing on the index finger. And she inserted her fingers, kind of like a pap smear. And that hook, she just ran it up the water bag. I don't know why the gloves really burned. They weren't latex, and I'm not allergic to latex anyways. The gloves really burned. So as soon as she finished doing that, I rolled out of bed, and I was just kind of waddling around going, ah! For some reason, that was like the most painful part of the labor and delivery with Jeremiah. And she was like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "It just burns." And she goes, "Why is your water bag not busting? I've never not had a water bag not bust. I know I touched it." And she was kind of flipping out. I think maybe she was afraid that she had done something else, but she didn't know what, because she's done this for so many years and she's never had this. And she's like, "Why is your water bag not busting?" I was like, "I don't know." And I was hopping from foot to foot, and about, I want to say it was probably only 50 seconds, but it felt like 5 years. It was like 50 seconds after she popped my water bag. It finally gushed out. The water did. And she's like, "Oh, okay, there goes your water bag." And I was like, And she goes, "What's wrong?" I was like, "I can't move." And she's like, "Do you need us to help you back to the pool?" I was like, "Yes, I want to get back in the pool." So they walked me out of my living room to the birthing pool. I counted it. It's only like 15 feet. And not like walking feet, I mean measurement feet, because, we don't have the metric system. So I don't know how far that would be in the metric system, but it was only about 15 feet. A foot is about 12 inches. And so my midwife got under one arm, my husband got underneath the other. They waddled me back, and my mom had my son at this point. I didn't know that they were still in the room. Apparently, when I screamed from the water bag, my mom was trying to get Eddie G back to sleep. They came into the living room to see my husband and the midwife helping me back into the birthing pool. And she's like, what's wrong? Are you okay? And I'm like, they popped my water bag. Well, I put one foot over the edge of the pool. And all throughout this thing, you know, all throughout your pregnancy and during labor and delivery, people tell you you're going to feel the need to push. And when you push, poop may come out. And that may be the feeling of the need to push. Don't worry about it. When I was starting to put one foot over the rim of the tub, I felt the need to push. So I stopped for a minute and I kind of pushed a little bit, but I didn't really want to because I was standing. I had one leg in the water, one leg not. And I was like, didn't push really hard. I just stopped for a minute and they were like, are you okay? And at that point, I was just focusing on breathing. I was going, ooh, ooh, doing the moaning thing because that kind of helps with pain so I'm not screaming. And they were like, are you okay? I was like, yeah, okay, just give me a minute. Ooh. And then when I was done doing that, I was like, okay. And I got back in the pool. I felt another small push, so I pushed again. Before I lowered myself in the water, I had both feet in the pool, and I was just standing with my hands on my hips. I gave a tiny push because, again, I was afraid I was pooping. I was afraid I was passing a bowel movement. I know that is so gross, but I was just sure that that's what it was. I didn't have that with my first son, but, you know, you read so much about it. I'm like, oh, my gosh, this is so embarrassing. I'm pretty sure I'm about to poop in the birthing tub. But I only gave a little push because I wanted to like sit all the way down because we had the light dim on. Like maybe no one will notice because I was in labor. I wasn't thinking rationally or that they see that all the time. I sat down and I was talking to my midwife, Heather. She was sitting on the couch across from me, and again, my knees were on the floor. I had my arms on the tub, and I was just kind of talking to her about the pain of the glove because she was assuring me it was in latex, and I was going like, I'm not allergic to latex. I don't know why that caused so much pain. Apparently, that's normal to have that kind of pain. And then when we were talking about how I have normally strong water bags, and all of a sudden I felt the need to push again. So I have my right knee on the floor. I raise up my left knee so my left foot is flat against the bottom of the birthing tub. Not the floor, but the birthing tub. And I stop missing it to push really, really hard. And I feel something like slowly going down. And it feels like a poop. I'm pushing really hard. It feels like mild constipation. It's not even the worst constipation I have. It's not like pushing a baby out. Not what I expected. Mom pushing and she goes, are you pushing? And I said, yeah, but it's nothing. And she's like, she gets her gloves on screaming, Sally, we have pushing. And my husband goes, and he had been sitting kind of beside me, patting my back, and he goes, oh my God, there's a baby's face in the water. And she's like, Sally! And I'm not entirely sure. I think Sally went to the bathroom or something. So she's screaming, and Heather makes her way around the tub and catches the baby just as his foot falls out of me, because apparently I had pushed him all the way out and didn't even realize that I was giving birth to a baby. Good news is, there was no poop whatsoever. I was so terrified and mortified. No poop whatsoever. So I'm like very proud of myself for that. I know that's a weird thing to be proud of myself about, but that's that. And my midwife Heather barely caught the baby, but he was still in the sack, so he wasn't drowning. He wasn't getting water into his lungs. He was still kind of, you know, he hasn't drawn his first breath yet. As we brought him to the surface, he was breathing. We put him on my chest and I held him in a towel, and it was perfect. The most beautiful experience ever. My mom was there, my husband was there. Eddie G came over immediately and was just kind of looking at him. He couldn't say brother and he couldn't say Jeremiah. Even now he can't say Jeremiah. He says JJ, which is cute. But then he was just looking and going, Mama? And he came over and he patted me and he kind of patted brother on the shoulder, but he was too scared to touch him. And it was just the most magnificent thing ever. I loved the birth of Jeremiah James, my son. It was the most beautiful birth I could have hoped for. And I really wanted to immortalize it and tell it when I still remember it, because it was just amazing. And the midwives helped me get there, and I hope that if I ever do have a pregnancy again, that someone's trying to text me, that I can go through them again, because it was amazing. That's the birth story of Jeremiah James.